Good evening, campers. It's your boy, Kieran, and today we are going to talk about Georges Bataille's story of The Eye, a book that has made me scratch my head more than any book in a good while. I've owned this copy for around 2 years because Clifford Lee Sargent over at Better Than Food Book Reviews put a video up saying that it was his favourite book of all time, and I think by now people know that as soon as someone says something's their favourite book, I'm invested. The story itself is only 70 pages. The rest are essays and Georges Bataille's reflections on the novel. So you might think, well, if it's only 70 pages, why have you put it off for 2 years? And the mere fact is that I wanted to read this alongside someone. I wanted to have a conversation, going back and forth with people, doing a little bit of research on it prior to picking it up. It's influenced a lot of people, including one of my favourite artists of all time, Björk. Yes, it's Björk, not Bjork.
My name is Björk. Hello, my name is Björk. Hello. My name is Björk. Hello, my name is Björk.
I will link down below her music video to Venus as a Boy, which is in conversation with this novel. So I decided to put this book up for my Book-a-Boy book club for March, and over 10 of us picked up this book. And here I think is a good point to give you a poetic rendition of 10 people reading the story of The Eye through Discord. Why? Why is his eggs going there? What?
Bull testicle.
Why?
Bull testicle.
Think about it long enough, the bull testicles don't seem that bad. Bataille's story of The Eye is it's the epitome of transgressive. This unequivocally has set the bar. Anything else I read now will pale in comparison to this. Is a book where even if you tried to assign trigger warnings to it, the entire list of trigger warnings would probably be longer than the book itself. I have to appreciate, and I do think readers will appreciate, how unashamedly, unapologetically blatant Bataille is. By now you might be curious, well, how far is Bataille taking things? Let's rein it in a bit. Now, I'm aware that when anyone says this is the most XYZ thing, or this is the most extreme XYZ thing, most people will go, well, how XYZ is it? Just to give you a smattering of understanding, this book, Story of the Eye, was written under a pseudonym originally, Lord Osh, which is a contraction of to the shit house in French. That's where Osh comes from. And Bataille used the word Lord because in English it's to mean God, our Lord God. Lord Osh literally means God relieving himself. Considering that, what is Story of the Eye about? We follow a young male protagonist and his relationship predominantly with Simone, and how Marcel becomes involved with them and the repercussions thereon after. Now, Simone and our narrator are in a very sexual, lusting relationship, and the sexual acts that they desire, provide and inflict upon one another are at times consensual, non-consensual, or where I'd say most of this book lies is on this blur, especially in regards to Simone and narrator. When they first meet Marcel in the first chapter, Simone and the narrator rape her. It's very graphic. After this rape, and bear in mind we're on chapter 2 right now, the narrator and Simone decide to find Marcel and have a relationship with her. They've got feelings, and are those feelings reciprocated? Are they relinquished? Are there feelings at all? I think what's interesting here to say is that though you might think that the rape is led by the narrator, Simone is probably the true protagonist of this story. She leads all the characters down these sexual deviant, transgressive routes by her own want. She's very strong-willed. She knows what she wants and she seeks out what to get. An example being when they go to Spain and Marcel is fixated on doing one particular act with bull testicles, and our male narrator is saying, you can't do that in public. And Simone, she does it and enjoys it. The final climax of the book, the last chapter, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot to unpack with that chapter, and I'll put my hands up. I felt really uncomfortable, and even like 3 pages towards the end, I was just thinking, I think I've reached my burning point here. Like I can't express what's going on in those pages, but I'll remember that scene. I'll remember that scene up until my dying days. I'll remember the book until my dying days because it's kind of just burnt onto my retina. There's no real escaping Story of the Eye. It's caustic. It's caustic. It's left its mark and it's bubbling. It hasn't completely eroded through. Reading Story of the Eye is very fever dream. I posed this question in the Discord. I can see why people are drawn to this book, and it's coming up to the 100th year when this book came out. I could see why readers are still curious. I can see why people would want to seek this book out to read it. It's not like an experience you're ever going to get. And again, it's going to set the bar in regards to transgression, in regards to erotica, in regards to pornography, in regards to maybe like the limits of imagination. But I'd love to be able to sit down with people like Björk or Clifford Lee Sargent and ask, what am I missing here? Because this is the piece of information that I'm going to be open and honest. I get it, but I don't get it. And I understand it, but I don't understand it. With all the repetitious frenzies, sexual acts and debaucherous endeavours, I'm kind of blinkered in a way, because all I can focus on are those. It's so in your face that just you're focused on that. Everything going on in the background, all the descriptions, all the metaphors. There's a lot of allusions in regards to eyes and seeing and objects that are fluid. There's conversation there, and Bataille clearly has built those into the story. Signs in general, I can see why Barthes enjoys this text. As a semiotician, the Story of the Eye must be an absolute enthralling time. Purposeful, but I'm not seeing the purpose. Is this making any sense? What Better Than Food's favourite book has done has illuminated something to me personally that I think I've always thought, but I've never had to consciously put it into practice in this book. As readers, when it comes to certain narratives, it is very easy to get caught up in the transgressions. And normally transgressions for an author are a spike, they're a climax, there's something to engage in a further discussion. Now, I'm not saying that's all writers. Writers who do transgressive acts just for the sake of doing a transgressive act is just bad writing. If your transgressive acts are merely to be transgressive and there's nothing else going on, you're a bad writer. Yet there are some books when the transgressions themselves supersede the novel to the point where people don't want to read it because they fixate solely on the transgression. Take Lolita, for example. People who haven't read it are the people who complain about it. And I know I've been in these conversations with them. And we're speaking to readers and non-readers alike. The question, in some way, shape or form, I'll paraphrase it, is why would you want to read a book about a paedophile? Now, Humbert is a paedophile, but Lolita is a lot more than that. Lolita is one of the best written works in the 20th century. It holds that title in full regard. For a more contemporary take, have a look at Hurricane Season or A Little Life. Both are transgressive in their own ways, but what's going on doesn't define the book itself. It's all about everything that's going on in and around those acts. But you're looking to see how an author is using that transgression. How are they depicting it? What is the mere purpose of this transgression? Rather than focusing solely on that transgression, I look outwards and pull myself back to the transgression at the beginning. What was the purpose at that moment in time? Why did the author decide to pull the punches there? That's something that I do internally. I can already feel someone tapping in the comments as we speak. You know your limits. If some transgressions are not for you, you don't have to read it. I'm not going to force a book into your hands, and no one should force a book into your hands. You know your limit. What might be too close to home for one person is something that you wouldn't really bat an eyelid at. I'm not being prescriptive, I'm just giving some advice of how to tackle transgressive acts. So where does Story of the Eye fit into all of this? Honestly, I don't really know. And I think if someone was to ask me about this book, I might fall into something that I don't enjoy, which is giving you a bit of a plot summary of, well, this happens and this happens and this happens. But again, I'm focusing just on the transgressions and not everything else that is going around it. I can't tell if this is a work of a brilliant mind who was ahead of his times, or I'm following breadcrumbs that Bataille has painstakingly put out for me that lead nowhere when it comes to book reviewing. And yes, we're getting this meta. There is an expectation that you know everything, you've understood, you've done all the research, you contextualized, you've synthesized and contracted the story down into words that you are going to spit out in front of a camera, and you watching this now will be able to gauge, do you want to read it, do you not want to read it, did the person love it, did they engage with it? There's this expectation that someone's done that work. There come times when reviewing books, and most of the books that I review, I'll be transparent, I read more books than I document and review over on YouTube and on Instagram. I do a lot more reading. Some of those books I just don't really have an opinion on, or they're just a little bit meh and in the middle somewhere. I don't tend to review those. I'm not shy from negative reviews. I'm probably more known for my negative reviews than my positive at this moment. But there's this stray category that does not comply with the books that I read. And these are the books, quite honestly, I don't really get. I just don't get it. It just goes completely over my head. But let me pop the big bubble for everyone. You're not gonna understand every single book. Like, you're just not. It's a fact. You know, there's nothing more grounding and there's nothing more humbling to put your hands up and go, I don't know what's going on here. No one likes the smarty pants who's read everything and knows everything, because people don't like those people because they just don't exist. Even the smartest minds in the world will at times put their hands up and go, I don't know. Like, I'm reading it, I'm digesting it, I'm processing it. I don't know. I don't know. That's fine. I'm not precious about stuff like that. There's more important things going on in the world than me trying to understand every single book that I've read. But I'd love to be able to sit down with the person who recommended it to me, Better Than Food, to see what he sees in it a bit more, in order to ask the questions that I want to ask. This is why I love reading people's favourite books, because you never know what you're going to get. You never know what they see in that book. You're not always going to agree but there's a shared experience. And despite your enjoyment, despite your discomfort, it's something. This is the splendour and pleasure of reading. You have something in common with someone who you've never met before. You don't even know really who they are. But in conversation and in discussion with books, you can learn so much about each other. Like, for me, this is a 5 out of 10. I will leave Cliff's completely enamoured review down below, as well as his review on Bataille's biography, which is fascinating in so many different ways. Story of the Eye. What else is there to say?